Overview. How can mistakes be spotted just before we are about to make them? The answer surely is to develop a habit of frequently challenging the truth of the statements and plans racing through our minds. A mistake diary. Good thinking habits need to become a natural part of the way you think in everyday life. One way to focus the mind on thinking in these ways is to keep a diary of the mistakes you make, as well as a diary of things you did inefficiently that you later realise you could have done in a better way. By analysing these events, you can figure out what you should have been thinking rather than what you did think. For example, a person comes towards you and you expect the person to walk past you, but the person stops and enters a phone box. We hardly see phone boxes nowadays, but that's an example. What was the mistake? Believing an expectation without seeking evidence to support the prediction of where the person would go. Making a simple model of the paths a person could walk. The phone box was not considered to be an option. This limited your ability to ask which one about the possible places the person might go to. The diary provides material for you to practice the new habits with. Done and dusted. I work with spreadsheets a lot, and some tasks involve repeated data entry over a few hours. It might be that some maths in a cell needs editing, and there are hundreds of cells which need finding and editing. Sometimes I stop at a cell on the spreadsheet and have a break. I'll make a hot drink and come back. I can move to the next cell and start editing that. This risks the done and dusted mistake. I am assuming that when I went for my break, it was after I did all the editing necessary on the cell that the cursor was on. What if I was so tired of concentrating that I decided not to do the current cell, then went for a break and came back to the unfinished cell? By me now moving on to the next cell, there is an unfinished task, but I am blind to it. Daily activities break down into steps where you might miss a step and not notice it. Forgetting to take your door key with you is a good example of that. You might actually be leaving your home and thinking, do I have my key? And having a weird certainty that you have your key, despite not actually checking your pocket for it. We are good at convincing ourselves that all necessary checks have been done. Intelligence leaps if you're able to develop a less one to miss a few approach to the beliefs that swim across your mind. I'm sure I'd remember. I walked a path as exercise, and it is a path which I hardly ever walk along. I saw it branch off, and I wondered if I could detour from the path and join up with it a little further along. But I couldn't remember if the detour does rejoin the path. And one of my thoughts was, you'd definitely remember if the detour track eventually joins back with the main path. After all, you've walked it once before, and your memory is good enough to remember a route back to the main path. And now I am imagining where the two routes might come together, and then I am unsure if this is something purely imagined or half based on a dim memory of a real rejoining track. I'm sure I'd remember is a false argument, but so is I am imagining the route so well that it probably really exists. Focused attention. A person cannot think about two things at once. Ask a psychologist. People just think they can. If you are not focused on a goal and why you are doing it, then your logical reasoning is more likely to fail. By concentrating on the whole of a problem, there is less chance of you tackling it inadequately. Concentration is something that can be improved by doing tasks which require concentration, such as chess. As an aside, I don't like playing chess nowadays, but years ago, when I had nothing to do, I had a chess computer game, and it helped to kill the time. It was very good for making me see that my mistakes had a pattern to them, and that they could be reduced by good habits. I wonder if people have a biological, genetic advantage in their ability to concentrate, like you get naturally fast runners who I could never beat despite training like mad. Actually, I don't wonder it, I'm pretty sure of it. Add to that, you hear of how the things we eat and drink can lower our concentration lifestyle. I also believe that some people have a short, powerful memory, a bit like photographic memory, but of short duration. They can do mental maths better because numbers don't slip into the wrong place. The carrier of 123 is not, some seconds later, remembered as 23. And so they don't make so many mistakes. And then their concentration is free to work on the task rather than having the ball and chain of slowing down to deal with many mistakes or simply arriving at the wrong answer. Realising that one's concentration is below average, one can think about lifestyle diet and think about forcing more breaks than an average person would have. Having said that, psychologists encourage anyone to take short breaks for the sake of concentration to be okay over a day's work. But lacking that natural advantage of powerful memory is a tough one to compensate for. I suppose we must recognise our limitations and then have a strategy to limit their effect. We can't be as good as the naturals, but we can be good, or quite good, and certainly better than we were. I read about famous savants, and some of them became less capable in adulthood. A wider theme here is that we probably need to review our own score of how good our memories are and how good our mental faculties are. Age can surely change our natural capabilities. Thinking time. A problem can only come to a sound conclusion when enough time has been spent on it. Coming up with a fast answer is not as a rule better than coming up with a well-considered answer over a long period of time. There is a bad habit of talking before thinking, or seeing a preliminary answer and stating it without having the good habit of holding the thought and criticising it before stating it. The answer is double-checked by considering if the problem as a whole has been understood correctly and considered fully. In chess, it is the habit of being reluctant to let go of the piece you are moving. Have I missed something? It feels okay to commit my move, but let's have a final check. With a business email, it's perhaps opening the email attachment you are about to send in order to double check that it is the intended file. Again, we bob through life generally successfully without the extra discipline in our thinking, so it is quite a detour to dedicate oneself to better thinking habits. How many thoughts we can hold in our heads. The cognitive psychologist George A. Miller is famous for writing about the topic of how many concepts one can work with simultaneously without tending to make errors. For different people, the number varies, and it is not, in my opinion, a very high number. I came across Miller's name when I was studying computer programming. You can write a quite complicated paragraph of code and call it by its name, such as do the 10 steps of maths. Although there are 10 things going on, I've chunked it together into one routine of code to call. In that way, my mind is freed up and thinking about one thing, even though 10 things are going on. A driver might not need to think about the street's route he will take when he is at the next town. For now, his task is to think about the streets necessary to get to that next town. Overall, he will be travelling a lot of roads, but he's thinking about a small number of them at any one time. It is good to remove clutter where we can so that our attention is focused on a small number of items. Accuracy is then a lot more likely. As an aside, computer programming can be very hard. There is something called a compiler, which tells you at which line your program code that you typed is not consistent with the rules of the computer language. It is telling you where the program would go wrong if you ran the code. This debugging process often involves the computer telling you a hint as to which line the error is at and what the nature of the error is. It can be a real headache because the error might actually be at the line above the line it has told you is wrong. And the hint can be wildly misleading too. I suppose it develops a discipline in me of taking matters into my own hands. Never mind what you're telling me, I'm going to try to shine a different light on the problem. Beyond that, there are mistakes which I make in my own logic, and also there are lines of code which a computer thinks are perfect, and so it does not report them as wrong, but they are mistyped words by me. In the same way that I recommend chess as a way to think about thinking, I would recommend computer programming too. What is thinking? Overview. This chapter looks at the background of what it is to think. It will introduce some useful vocabulary for describing the world around us, or useful vocabulary for describing the concepts we are playing with as we think. Of course, this is just me writing. I'd be very dubious of anyone telling me what thinking is. It can be all sorts of things. When do you think? You might have a goal which you try to achieve by thinking about given facts, e.g., what will you watch on television, given that there are many channels to choose from? Or you might just think because observation happens naturally, e.g., you see a door and must have done some thinking in order to have recognised that what you were looking at is a door. Thinking is a tool. People want things. They think in order to get what they want. Thinking is a way to achieve their goals. A lot of thinking is not done as a way to achieve goals. It just happens. It is good that thinking just happens because it brings to our attention our desire to achieve some goal or information which might be useful for achieving a goal. An example of goal setting. Some facts. Shoes are worn on the feet. The butcher's sells meat. The shoe shop sells shoes. The barber's does haircuts. The sun is hot. The shops are shut on Sundays. Goal. I want to buy some shoes. Note how the goal directs thoughts towards facts and ways of using facts. My thoughts, I consider facts which relate to shoes. Some may be irrelevant to the buying of shoes by me. I consider whether today is a Sunday because that information is relevant to deciding whether a shoe shop can sell me shoes. Facts, rules, classes, uncertainty. Note, I can imagine people holding me up on minor points, but this is how I imagine very clever people abstract the world. Their vocabulary, while they process information, involves something like this language. Facts. A fact is capable of being true or false. E.g., I own a car. I either do or I do not. Facts have some of these qualities. Structure. An object has shape and size and is made of some material. For example, a car of metal, an apple of organic material. Direct function. The car has wheels which turn, an indicator switch which switches, lights which turn on or off. The apple grows. These are functions which are directly related to the structure. Indirect function. The car can be seen as being an isolated thing. It is a system. The apple can be seen as being an isolated thing. It is a system. Systems can interact with a, context. For example, the car touches a road, the wheels turn on the road's surface, the turning of the wheels is a direct function, but the act of driving involves the road, context. And so driving is an indirect function. A room in a house is a system, and the overall house is its context, or I suppose bigger system. In that example, the system is part of the context. Purpose. What is the car's purpose? Perhaps to transport the driver. What is the apple's purpose? Perhaps its use as food. The apple might be used as a ball for a game, so purpose depends on the goal of a person. If I want to play, then the apple's purpose is different to its purpose when I want to eat. In contrast, function is how a structure changes state. Sometimes function achieves purpose. For example, the being eaten function of an apple helps me fulfill my desire to eat, or the wheels turning function of a car allows me to drive. I will use the word goal when talking about an aim or desire with many objectives to it. For example, travelling to work is an aim or goal, and it has many objectives to be met. I travel to work by using a pavement with its purpose as a medium for travel. I use a train with its purpose as a medium for travel. So a goal is a desired result, while a purpose is why a system like a train is useful for achieving the result. Location. Structures have location. There can be a context, like a garden where there is a flower structure and grass, other structure, in that location. Label. A name is given to things. You can call a bed a lit in French, but it is a bed regardless of the name you apply to it. Labels are useful for the communication of information or for noting information. Language problems occur when labels are misread or misheard, misinterpreted, or mean many things, or a meaningless utterance might be interpreted as being meaningful. Concepts. Emotions and moods are feelings. Being thoughts, they might be thought of as being aspects of the brain structure and function, but they do not have their own structure. A concept, like music, also lacks a structure, and yet all of these concepts can exist in the mind. In addition to this, structures, functions, etc. can be thought about, and so they are capable of being concepts too. I will sometimes use the word concept to mean those intangible things, but I will also use it to mean, concepts, the stuff I'm thinking about, which are, as thoughts, intangible too. Relationship. One system can be related to another system. For example, the man eats a sandwich relates the man to the sandwich, to eating. Relationships can be indirect. For example, a man in India can be related to a man in England by the fact that they each take trains regularly. This is a loose tie between them, an indirect relationship. Symbolism. A system can symbolize a meaning. For example, a road sign of meaning. A sign about men doing work is not the same thing as literally men doing work, but there is a meaning to the sign which alerts us to be on the lookout for roadworks. A symbol is capable of being misinterpreted. For example, X on a page might mean a letter sound or a mathematical multiplication. A symbol might not have been intended to be a symbol by anyone. For example, 3 fallen twigs might land in an arrow shape. It might be believed by a passerby to be an arrow placed there to guide lost people. Note that labels are a type of symbol. Rules. Sarah is always late can be expressed as, if Sarah is here now, then Sarah is late. Sarah is here now, a fact, goes hand in hand with Sarah is late, another fact. A sentence expressible as if fact 1 then fact 2 is a rule. So if Sarah is here now, then Sarah is late. If fact 1 then fact 2. A rule like the above one allows you to know a fact as a result of being given another fact. For example, the Sarah is here fact must occur with the Sarah is late fact. Mistakes involve belief that an assertion is fact, but really it is not. I've told you that Sarah is always late, but maybe I have an axe to grind and I'm trying to give her a bad reputation. She might really be quite a punctual person. Once you believe me, the possibility of mistakes opens up. Your fact chain of A goes hand in hand with B is perfect and logical, but the quality of a fact is bad. Classes. A car, a bicycle and a boat are all vehicles. The idea of a vehicle is a class of which the car, bicycle and boat are specific examples. The class is a fragile idea of what is essential in an object for it to be an example of a vehicle. A bed is not a vehicle because it lacks the essentials of a vehicle, but my personal definition of what a bed is and of what a vehicle class is. Similarly, a cottage, block of flats and shop are all examples of the buildings class. Sometimes there are different definitions of what are the essentials of a class. I might claim that a car must have 4 wheels for it to be a car. You might claim that a 3-wheeled type of vehicle can still be a car. Someone else might say that a toy car is a car. So there may be an unclear or fuzzy idea of what a car is, and people talk of semantics. This fuzzy definition of a class allows me to say that a radio is nothing like a car, but that a van is much like a car, and that some things might be cars, while a Rolls-Royce I see definitely as a car. Note that examples can themselves be classes. For example, there are many types of Rolls-Royce, so cars is a class with Rolls-Royce as an example, while Rolls-Royce is a class with many examples. Note also that seemingly unrelated items can be members of the same class, so an iron, a chair and a balloon are all things in my home, and so they belong to a class, despite not being very similar at all. Something I've been pondering is, if a lot of people start using a word in a particular way, then it somehow becomes a true definition of the word, or at least enough plausibility to be taken seriously as a meaning. For instance, a lot of people say in early May that the weather is summer weather, but purists might say that summer begins later in the year. We're still in spring. The weather is similar to June weather because it is nice and sunny. In a way it is summer weather, enough for me to not argue with people for calling it summer weather. I guess a good thinker would have a cached memory that summer in one hemisphere is winter in the other, and ideas for deductions would float across his or her mind. I think that it is hard to follow a conversation if mental time is spent checking definitions and probabilities of what people are stating. Someone states that something is good or bad, and you either accept the statement at face value and listen to the next thing the person says, or you partition the conversation into the part you're evaluating and the new part arriving. How can that work cleanly? What if someone uses two contrary definitions of a word while the conversation progresses, it all gets very messy. Uncertainty. We tend to think with a goal in mind. We observe the world, or recall memories, and think about ideas. Sometimes we come across uncertainty, like, I am not sure if my observational abilities are accurate, e.g. poor eyesight or watching a fast-moving object. I am not sure what class the item I am observing belongs to. So, is the person in the distance a child or an adult? I'm unsure if a rule is true, e.g. if I jog often then I will be healthier. Maybe this is only true for some people, or not true at all. Someone talks about a class by pronouncing its label. I'm not sure that my definition of the label has the same essential ingredients as the talker thinks it has. E.g., one person thinks the phrase good musician means someone who sounds good on an instrument, but I think the word is probably being used to mean technical accomplishment on an instrument, even if the music played sounds bad to me. Mistakes occur when we do not spot that something is uncertain and believe in it. E.g., I might believe that a good card player is just lucky, but without valid evidence I should not believe the idea. Or I might see a childlike person in the distance and decide that the person cannot be an adult, without proof. Uncertainty is difficult to think about because it can so easily slip the memory that an idea is not proven with valid evidence. I can imagine the person in the distance to be a child, a white boy, but I have to distinguish a plausible concept from what is certain. And remember that the imagined concept is not proven. Weak concentration and the low limit on how many concepts we can juggle in our minds at any one time exacerbate the problem of evaluating what is certain and remembering the uncertainty score that we have given something. If I forget that I'm dubious of a fact, then I might just remember the fact and use it in my logic. So that Miller's number idea of how much we can safely juggle in our minds is a huge problem for you humans. Using this vocabulary, you have now come across the following terms: change, class, concept, context, essentials, evidence, which can be valid or not, example, fact, function, fuzziness, goal, label, location, meaning, observation, plausibility, proof, purpose, relationship, rule, structure, symbol, system, uncertainty. This vocabulary can be used to describe difficulties which people encounter when thinking. Very important points in this chapter are: 1. It is easy to mistake a plausible concept for a proven fact. When something is plausible, it is easy to believe it. Good thinkers have the habit of challenging the validity of their thoughts, even when facts seem obviously true. There are goals which people aim to achieve by pursuing sub-goals or objectives. Some goals are more important than others. You might succeed at one goal by spending time that should have been spent on some other goal. Also, a sub-goal might cease to be important because of a change in circumstances, like trying to score in football after the final whistle. I call that trumping. Situation A has been trumped by situation B. Good thinkers have the habit of regularly challenging the worth of pursuing a goal or sub-goal, and thus avoid wasting or misusing time.